On October 4, 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth. For the Americans, that wasn't just a scientific achievement, it was a wake-up call. In one sense, Sputnik represented years of research and development. But in another, it was proof of how quickly the Soviets could move. When they put their minds to something, the US had been warned about the Soviets' rocketry progress, but no one anticipated how quickly they'd leapfrog American science. It was the start of the space race, and soon the competition would intensify. Within 22 months of Sputnik, Alan Shepard became the first American to reach space. By May 1963, President John F. Kennedy had committed the United States to landing astronauts on the moon before the end of the decade. And then on July 20, 1969, Neil Armstrong became the first human to walk on the moon. But the space race was only part of the bigger picture because in many ways, the Cold War was more than a battle of nuclear arms and ideological differences. It was also a contest between two superpowers eager to outdo each other in all aspects of science and technology. And it was this rivalry that led to some of the most important inventions and innovations in modern history. The truth is, during the Cold War, both sides pushed each other to innovate at lightning speed. Without the space race, satellites, GPS, and even laptops might not have happened. But it wasn't just about scientific achievement. It was also about being first and winning the PR battle. The Soviets were the first to send a satellite into space, so America wanted to be the first to land a man on the moon. After that, it was back to the drawing board and new challenges. By the end of the Cold War, the United States had launched 169 missions to the moon and Venus, sent 6 spacecraft through the entire solar system and beyond, landed the first spacecraft on Mars, launched the first space station, conducted hundreds of experiments in space, and trained thousands of astronauts. At times, it seemed like there was a never-ending stream of news about the latest space achievement. But it wasn't always easy. Many missions failed, sometimes spectacularly. But the space program pressed on undeterred, and by the end of the 20th century, America had clearly won the battle for supremacy in space. But while the US was focused on reaching the moon, the Soviets were working on equally ambitious projects, including creating the first space station. In fact, they beat the US to the punch by 5 years, launching Salyut in 1971. That same year, the Soviets also sent the first space station to Venus. The space race wasn't just about reaching the moon. Both sides experimented with new technologies, conducted scientific research, and explored new frontiers. All of this was happening at breakneck speed, and without the space race, who knows when these things might have happened. For example, the first satellite to orbit the Earth was launched in 1957. But it wasn't until the late 1960s that commercial applications of satellites became possible. This led to the creation of new industries, such as satellite communications, Earth observation, and global positioning systems. In fact, the first GPS satellite was launched in 1978, and by the end of the Cold War, GPS was an indispensable tool for military and civilian users alike. And while GPS is now taken for granted, it's hard to imagine our world today without it. Another invention that can be traced back to the Cold War is the laptop. Believe it or not, the technology that makes modern laptops possible was developed during the 1960s as part of the military. Its efforts to miniaturize computers. The goal was to create a portable computer that could fit in a backpack and be used in the field. And although the early laptops were bulky and expensive, they were a far cry from the behemoths that filled the Pentagon's computer rooms just a few years earlier. And it wasn't long before the technology trickled down to the consumer market. In fact, the first truly portable computer, the IBM 5100, was introduced in 1975, and it cost just $800 in today's money. Today, laptops are ubiquitous and come in a wide range of prices and configurations. They've become essential tools for work, school, and leisure. It's hard to imagine our world today without them. But it's worth remembering that the technology that makes modern laptops possible was first developed as part of the military's efforts to miniaturize computers during the Cold War. In many ways, the space race was a microcosm of the Cold War itself. Both sides were locked in a bitter rivalry, but they also had a grudging respect for each other's abilities. Each new achievement by one side was matched or even surpassed by the other. and it wasn't until the end of the Cold War that it became clear who had won. The truth is, the space race was one of the most exciting chapters in the history of science and technology. It was a time when the world was on the brink of the unknown, and two superpowers raced to explore it. In many ways, it was a time of hope and optimism. It was a time when anything seemed possible, and the future looked bright. Today, however, it seems like the spirit of the space race has been lost. The rivalry between the superpowers has cooled, and there seems to be little urgency to push the boundaries of what's possible. Instead, there's a sense that we've already reached the promised land, and there's nowhere else to go. But this couldn't be further from the truth. The truth is, there's still so much to explore and so much to discover. There's still so much that we do and know about the universe that it's almost impossible to comprehend. We've only scratched the surface of what is possible, and we've barely begun to explore the potential of human ingenuity. The space race was more than just a battle of wills between two superpowers. It was a catalyst for innovation and a driving force behind some of the most important technological advances in history. And while the Cold War may be over, the spirit of the space race should live on. We should continue to push the boundaries of what's possible and explore the unknown with courage and determination. After all, it's in our nature to explore and discover. It's what we've always done, and it's what we have continued to do for as long as there are new frontiers to explore. But let's get back to the Cold War. The space race wasn't the only thing that the two superpowers were competing over. They were also vying for supremacy in terms of weapons technology. And this led to the development of some truly terrifying weapons. The H-bomb, for example, was a weapon of unimaginable destruction. And it was clear that whoever possessed this weapon had the upper hand. But as the Cold War dragged on, it became clear that neither side could destroy the other with just a few well-placed nukes. And so the search began for new and even more destructive weapons. One of the most controversial weapons ever developed was the neutron bomb, which was designed to kill people but not destroy buildings and other structures. It was seen as a way to limit the damage caused by nuclear weapons and give the military more options in terms of how to respond to a nuclear attack. But the neutron bomb was just one of many new and innovative weapons that were developed during the Cold War. The Soviets, for example, developed the vacuum bomb, which used a vacuum to cause massive overpressure. And the Americans developed the airburst weapon, which could be detonated in the upper atmosphere to create a fireball that rained down destruction on its targets. But perhaps the most terrifying weapons of all were the ones that never saw the light of day. During the height of the Cold War, both sides were developing new and more destructive weapons all the time. But many of these weapons were never finished because they were simply too dangerous to use. One example was the Soviet Union's plan to build a nuclear-powered spacecraft that could deliver a nuclear payload to any target in the world. Another example was the American plan to develop a nuclear-powered plane that could fly around the world without refueling. These weapons were never finished because they were simply too dangerous to use. But they serve as a reminder of just how destructive the Cold War could have been. It's clear that the Cold War was one of the most important periods in recent history. It shaped the world we live in today in ways that we're only beginning to understand. And while it's easy to focus on the negative aspects of the Cold War, it's also important to remember the positive contributions that came out of this era. The space race, for example, was a time of hope and optimism. It was a time when anything seemed possible and the future looked bright. And while the space race is over, the spirit of exploration and discovery should live on. The Cold War also led to the development of some truly innovative weapons. And while these weapons were terrifying, they also serve as a reminder of just how destructive the Cold War could have been. But ultimately, it was the human element that made the Cold War so fascinating. It was a battle of wills between two superpowers, and it was a battle that was fought on all fronts. From the icy plains of Antarctica to the jungles of Vietnam, the Cold War was a truly global conflict. And it was a conflict that ultimately defined the second half of the 20th century.